everyone. Welcome back, or for those that haven't been here before, plain welcome. So we have today 3 speakers, and each of them sent me their bios. So for the next half an hour, I'm going to introduce them to you. But actually, I summarized their bios and combined them, and I would like to let you know that a common theme through their bios is agricultural diploma program, and in other words, the best school of agriculture in Canada, or maybe in the world even. So the credentials or brain power is definitely there. So in terms of their background, Michele Rogalsky has a diploma program in agriculture and a degree in economics from the University of Manitoba. Cora Dupuis has a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Waterloo, a certificate in fostering first-year student success from the University of South Carolina, and soon will be receiving a Master's of Education from the University of Manitoba. And last but not least, Kristen MacMillan has a diploma in agriculture, a BSc in agriculture agronomy, and an MSc in plant science and cropping systems. So welcome, the 3 of you. Just some further highlights. Michele farmed in southern Interlake with her husband, and she has a long list of accomplishments with respect to being an instructor in courses related to farm management and agriculture. In 2011, we were all very delighted that Michele accepted the director position in the School of Agriculture, and through her leadership, our school continues to flourish. And also, this is something that I learned today, and I thought I knew everything about Michele, but no, incorrect. Michele is a member of the Canadian Association of Diploma in Agricultural Programs and is currently serving as their president. So thank you, Michele, for letting me know. In terms of Kristen, prior to joining the U of M, Kristen was a director of research and production with the Manitoba pulse and soybean growers. And in 2016, Kristen joined our faculty, and she is currently in an Agronomist in Residence program, and that was initiated by the Manitoba pulse and soybean growers. And Cora has been a champion of experiential education at the post-secondary level, including being the Director of Student Life at the University of Manitoba. And we were fortunate to recruit Cora in 2018, and she has been instructing faculty through 2 faculty and students, I have to say, 2 experiential learning pilot courses, and she's currently tasked with expanding the experiential, and after this seminar I will be fluent in that word, but for some reason it's very difficult for a Dutch Canadian to pronounce. But she will be leading experiential learning initiatives in the School of Agriculture. So please welcome the 3 of them.
Thank you, Anamika. We are really thrilled to receive the invitation because we love teaching, and to have a faculty seminar focused on teaching, we want to acknowledge you and thank you for the leadership. And we're going to share our passion about teaching today. And I also want to acknowledge you for the theme on partnerships. And again, I think we're going to demonstrate today the value of partnerships. So we do have a bit of an agenda for you. I'd like to start off and share some of the experience-based learning that we have in the Ag Diploma program. Then Cora's going to take over and define and share with you what experiential learning is. Cora's then also going to share some of the experiences for the pilot project for the experiential learning courses that have been offered at the Glenlee Research Station. They're being offered now this and fall term, and they were offered this summer. Then Kristen's going to come and speak about the experiential learning project course that she taught this summer to Ag Diploma students in the area of soybean agronomy. And then we'd like to share about where we think the faculty could go and how we'd like to partner with you in moving forward. So does that sound okay? Okay, first of all, the Ag Diploma Program, if you're not aware of it, it's a 2-year applied program, and we've been focusing on production, livestock cropping production, and business management. It's an integrated program. The program is delivered by academics in the various departments throughout the faculty, and I'm really proud to be a diploma grad and to be a member of the academic team delivering it. The past 4 years, I believe it is, we underwent a curriculum review process, which has resulted in a revised curriculum, which we have implemented starting this September with our first cohort. The curriculum review process started on identifying learning outcomes. To do that, we consulted widely with our stakeholders, and that was alumni, industry partners, students, academics. And what we learned through that process, that there's a number of technical and content skills that we need to maintain in the diploma program, but strong areas that were identified were the fluid skills, the skills in communication, leadership, professionalism, and teamwork. We also heard loud and clear that the importance of our students being able to think critically, make informed decisions, be able to address the changes in our industry that are resulting from changes in technology, and be able to integrate that and put it together. And doing that, applying that crop production knowledge, that livestock production knowledge, that business management knowledge, all together to make an informed management decision. So as I said, we've got a long history, and we've been doing it for over 100 years, and a lot of it has been experience-based, right, Cora? And so there has been a focus on experience-based learning. And we've done a lot of it with partners. One area I'd like to mention is the area of farm safety. The schools, worked with a number of partners, including the Manitoba Farm Safety Program, the Glenlee Research Station, Manitoba Canola Growers, who provided interim funding, Farm Credit Canada, and the Canadian Ag Safety Association. Over the past 4 years, these partners have all helped us to develop a really effective one-day tractor workshop for our first-year diploma students that's held out at the Glenlee Research Station. The Glenlee staff delivers some of the components. Some of our instructors, Devin does the component on tractor extraction, and Morag Margison from Manitoba Farm Safety Program on the PTOs. It's a day where the students can get their hands on equipment and understand and experience tractors. But the success of this has been, I think, on the development and delivery with all of the partners. In the Ag Diploma Program, we have a number of tours. Reg Dick and his team take students each fall. I remember when Don Flayton was the director way back a long time ago, we'd go on weekly tours, or a whole week of tours. And we still have those strong connections with our partners in industry, either primary producers in livestock and cropping areas. We also tour processing plants. And we identify tour hosts who will partner with us to demonstrate innovation and a collaboration with our students. A focus has been on leadership and exposing our students to interact with industry leaders. This is a picture of the first year class when we went to the Manitoba Young Farmers session. Students during luncheon and during sessions would be able to engage and interact with the president of Keystone Ag Producers, other young farmers, and at that session they were asked to share their perspectives, what they perceived were the important issues to them as young farmers in a professional environment and speaking with industry leaders. We also provide that opportunity. The second year students go to the CAP annual meeting. This is the annual breakfast meeting where students sit with delegates from each of the CAP areas, usually from their community, and we encourage them to have discussions focusing on what are the issues that are related to their home communities. So again, students, you notice they're dressed professionally. Phil and Cora address body image and interpersonal communication skills, and they have the opportunity to apply them in these situations. The one thing that we were told in the curriculum review was untouchable, and that was the capstone course in the Ag Diploma program. Sometimes it's called Final Pres or MPP, and now in the new curriculum it's the Farm Management Project. And in that project, students have the opportunity to apply the production livestock production, cropping production, the business management skills to their own family farm or a case farm. So everything that they've learned in that diploma program, they apply to it, they do a historic analysis of those practices, and then they put on a management cap, and they have to then propose a plan, and they have to defend a plan, and they have to use the complex decision-making skills that a farmer uses. We have some really key partners in this project, and that's the farm family. In Ag Diploma, we have an orientation the first day or day before classes. We have an orientation for the students and their parents. In the morning session, the parents meet with our farm management team, and we speak about the importance of providing the opportunity for their son or daughter to use their farm records as a basis for their experiential learning. And throughout the 2 years, those parents and those family members are key to that learning, of which the student is the center. Through that process, each student is assigned an individual advisor. We have 5 farm management advisors who work with the students, challenge them, and encourage them as they're developing their plans and supporting them through that process. And finally, it ends up, I compare it to almost like an oral defense of a master's thesis. They have to defend their plan, present it to a group of specialists, which includes academics, industry leaders, and which includes producers. And so that continues in the Ag Diploma program, and I perceive it's one of the strengths that we really do have. We also have a special project course. It's a 3-credit-hour course where students can apply the knowledge that they've learned into a specific area. And I've worked with Tracy Gilson. Tracy, in addition to her role as the operations manager at GRS, she also has an academic appointment with the school as an instructor, and has worked with 5 students to date on developing a special project. And that, through that process, Tracy develops a learning contract with the students. They identify what the learning outcomes, they negotiate and discuss what the learning outcomes would be, what would the learning objectives or learning methods would be, and ultimately an assessment tool. I've also had the opportunity to offer that course in the area of communications and industry relations. Glenn Friesen from Manitoba Ag had hired one of our students in the summer, and he was really impressed with the skills that this student had acquired taking our advanced communications course. So the student was doing things like improving their web, writing some fact sheets, and really making a positive impact. The student spoke about the Ag Diploma program, and Glenn approached me and said, is there a way that we could provide a learning opportunity for another student? So Michele Rogalsky took the advanced course and also wanted to expand her skill set further in that area. She wanted to engage with industry. She wanted the opportunity to apply her social media skills. She wanted to apply her professional skills and networking. She attended a number of events with MBFI. She wrote some fact letters for them. She attended some other events and served as their media specialist, transmitting that knowledge. And the final project that she had was to coordinate and deliver an event here on campus where MFBI could present their information and resources to students and academics. And it was a real positive event. And Michele, after the reflection about the project, really indicated that it assisted with her learning. Another example of that is with DAGR, and again, it's partnerships. Myrna Grant also is an instructor with the school, and with the communication course, she had Todd Hyra from CCAN come in and spoke about communication and how important it is to messaging. And he would like to work with us on a special project. So DAGR, who was a second-year diploma student, also expressed an interest. So we partnered them together. And initially, the contract started just with Todd and I and Jake. And what he did was prepared and delivered a presentation to CCAN members about ag communication. And then he wanted the opportunity to have different audiences, and so we worked with Sue Clayton, and so he was able to then to do some presentations in ag in the classroom, and he also presented to the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce leadership students, and it was a real positive experience for him. So we've got experience-based, and we know it's valuable, but during our curriculum review, we've really been thinking about how we're going to increase our students' ability to critically think and at that higher level. And it's been people who've really influenced this last 3 years. And Mark Torcha, the director from the center, is one. Colleen Webb from the Center for Advancement in Teaching Learning. Shek old Michele here, and Cora Dupuis. They have been working with me and my academic team to help us identify how we can bring our learning and teaching to a higher level and transform it into experiential learning, which Cora is going to speak about now.
So you might be thinking to yourself, Michele, we're doing all this wonderful work, like all this experience-based learning. It's amazing. So why are we shifting? Well, frankly, before I can answer this question of why we should shift, let's define, or let's further describe experience-based learning and experiential learning. Let's make some distinctions here. Experience-based learning is when knowledge is passed down through experience by one generation to the next. And so it may be from a parent to a child, it may be from a master to an apprentice, or it's even exhibited in our 4-H clubs. If you think about it, their motto is learn to do by doing. So experience-based learning has been happening for centuries and continues to happen even today. So we see it all the time, it's all around us. But experiential learning is a much newer idea. In 1938, John Dewey wrote a book. John Dewey is an educational philosopher. And at the time, the intention of his book was to help differentiate what was happening in a traditional schoolhouse or in a traditional classroom and to what he thought would be a better method depending on what it was that you were teaching. He thinks there's still value in that traditional classroom, but let's say you wanted to teach teach children at that time, teach children about plants. Well, for him, it would be much better to take them out of the classroom and into the garden or to the farm or directly to nature so that they could see plants in all their glory. He's often referred to as the grandfather of experiential learning, one of the first to lay the foundation of this philosophical work. Now, one of the early practitioners is Kurt Hahn. He was a headmaster at a British school for young men. And in 1942, when World War II was happening, they were facing unprecedented losses at sea. So the Navy approached Kurt Hahn and said, is there something you could do to better prepare these young men before we send them off to battle? And he said, well, actually there is. There's this thing called experiential learning, and I'd like to create real-life scenarios and bring them into real-life settings. And as much as possible, let's find ways so that they can practice the decision-making skills that they need to, the communication skills, the teamwork skills that they need to be successful on the battlefield. So he did it, and he was successful. And even after the war, he said, I'm going to keep doing this. And it's now what's known as Outward Bound, which is an adventure-based experiential learning program. Then about 35 years ago, so there's all these ideas and these practitioners are picking up these pieces and making these distinctions. About 35 years ago, Dr. David Kolb developed the experiential learning model. He said, I want a way to clearly identify this in some sort of visual representation so that other people can pick this up. And so although I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time explaining the nuances of this model, we could be here all day if I did, but basically, he said the student needs to start with some sort of concrete experience. They need to do something. And then immediately after, there needs to be a reflective component. The student needs to think about what exactly happened, how did it happen, why did it happen? And then they draw abstract conceptualization. So they're drawing conclusions, they're making ideas, and then they're applying it. What new ideas they've come up with or what connections they've made, they're then applying it, and the cycle continues around and around. So now, quick recap. I talked about experience-based learning happening for centuries, happening every day. Experiential learning, there's more intention. We're being mindful as to where the learning happens. We're looking for real-life scenarios for the students to actively participate in. So I'm making these distinctions and descriptions for you, but let's actually define experiential learning for you. The Association for Experiential Education put forward this definition And there's lots of definitions. But this one I'm introducing today, it's a philosophy that informs many teaching methodologies in which educators purposely engage with learners in direct experience and focused reflection. So let's zero in on those three characteristics. Educators are purposefully engaging with their learners in direct experience and focused reflection. So in a nutshell, what we're doing right now with all this great experience-based learning is these first two pieces. We're doing this really, really well within the school. And there are opportunities for some things to shift and introduce a focused reflective component so that a deeper level of learning can be achieved. So as mentioned, as Anna-Mika brought up, I recently joined the faculty. I had the opportunity this summer to lead 2 experiential learning courses. I'm teaching again this semester. To give you a very brief introduction, the first course is an overview of 4 different animal production methods. And then the second course, or the advanced level course, students get to specialize in one method. So it could be poultry, dairy, swine, or beef. And so this is a photo of us at the farm in the summer. So I'm going to bring us back to these characteristics and describe how I've used them and applied them in designing the course. So it's so great that we're talking about partnerships, because this is exactly how the course was developed. So with the team at the Glenlee Research Station, the technicians that are in the barn, we start with the question of what experience do we want the students to have? What is it that they can do that they would gain valuable knowledge, maybe develop a new skill, do something they've never done before? So that's the place. We're here to create an experience for them. And while they're there, it's not just go and have an experience, but we're there right alongside them as they're doing that experience. And then there's a focused reflection component, and I do this in 2 distinct ways. There's the reflection that happens in the moment, as almost immediately after they've accomplished a task. I'm asking them questions of like, how did that feel, or what didn't you expect? And then there's also reflective, or that kind of bookends each end of that. So I'll talk a little bit more with a specific example. So just yesterday, we were at the farm in the dairy barn, and we explained to the students how to go about restraining a calf. And here we have David, one of our students, who, after learning how to do it, actually had the opportunity to do it. And so immediately after, I'm asking him, so what surprised you? Or what didn't you expect? Or what was more difficult than what you had anticipated? And so things like, well, I didn't expect it to move. I know that sounds silly, but when you explain it kind of in an abstract form, you're like, you do this and this and this. But then when you actually try to do it, and the calf is licking your hand, and you're like, that's not what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, there's that reflection that happens in the moment. Another great example that we draw is explaining flight zones. So we explained what a flight zone was, but then we had students in teams, and of course our technicians and our myself and Jason Boursier, who is also there. And so you've learned how to negotiate a flight zone, but when you actually have to do it with a cow, and then also you have other cows around you, so you're negotiating their flight zones at the same time. So, and then right after that experience, I'm asking them questions of like, what was more difficult, or what surprised you, or what did it feel like? So if I go back to those characteristics, I said we have the reflection in the moment, but I bookend the experience. So even before students arrive that day, they complete a reflection. I give them a set of questions of, what do you know about this animal's production process? Where does that information come from? Sometimes it comes from courses that they've taken with the faculty before. Sometimes I get, they saw it in a Netflix documentary. But it's important for them to identify, where do I know this information from? And then one step further, what do I want to know? So that when they arrive in the barn, they come ready with questions, and the technicians and the team there are so great and answer all of their questions. And then after the experience, I have a different set of questions for students that they answer. And so writing is a deep form of thinking. And for them to fill out these reflections within within a couple days of having that experience, some really wonderful things come to the surface. And I see the change in them over the course of this semester. I see a change in their writing, but don't take it from me. Let's go to the results. The students themselves said, so this is from the summer course, we had a second-year student in science who participated in the course. So she's not even in our faculty, but she identified that I learned a great deal of knowledge and skills that are very helpful. So she's sharing that this is important to her and this was valuable. And on the flip side, a student from our faculty, a fourth-year animal sciences student, she said, I also learned different animal production processes which enhanced my prior knowledge. So it's taking what she learned in the classroom from her avian systems and swine systems, but applying it and deepening that for her. So I've defined experiential learning for you, but really, why do we do it? And so again, I go back to the Association of Experiential Education, and they've identified 4 key areas. It increases knowledge, it develops skills, it helps to clarify an individual's values, and it helps them enhance, or it helps them enhance the learners, it enhances the learner's capacity to contribute to their communities. So back to that original question, why are we shifting? Well, it's not really why are we shifting, but why are we shifting now? Because we heard that. In the curriculum review that Michele talked about, this is what industry, this is what students, this is what young alumni are telling us. But as we're having this conversation in the school, there's a national conversation underway. The Business and Higher Education Roundtable, which is made up of 24 leaders from industry, universities, colleges, and polytechnics, are coming together and they've identified that there's a gap between what's happening in education and what's happening in employment. So how do we bridge that gap? And their most recent suggestion is a call for a national strategy on how to infuse experiential learning through all post-secondary. And then finally, I'll also say that other institutions are embracing this wholeheartedly. And one I want to draw your attention to, because I really like the way in which they organized it. They created a continuum. So they recognize that there's classroom-focused opportunities, that there are community-focused opportunities, and there are work-focused opportunities. And so York University, being in Toronto in a subway, they designed it like a subway line, but I think it illustrates it in a really wonderful way. So with this shift, we all win. Our students have increased knowledge, they develop more skills, they're able to clarify their values and enhance their capacity to serve their communities when they leave. So now that I've shared what it is and why it's important to do, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen MacMillan, who's going to share how she was able to integrate experiential learning in her course.
Okay, so the first partnership that I would like to acknowledge here is that partnership that Anamika mentioned already, but the partnership between Manitoba pulse and soybean growers. Not sure the laser. Where is the laser here? So was the laser working? Oh, it's the middle one, wrong button. Okay. The partnership between Manitoba pulse and soybean growers, the provincial government, and the University of Manitoba. So that partnership aimed to build our faculty's capacity to conduct applied agronomic research, and that was done through the Agronomist in Residence program. So I have a title here for my segment of the seminar, and it does 2 things. It kind of gives you a sneak peek at what some of the outcomes are of the course that I developed this summer, and that is building skills and knowledge. And it also addresses the target audience for this course, and that is diploma students who are going to be future farmers and agronomists. So the primary focus of the Agronomist in Residence program is to conduct agronomic research in soybean and pulse crops. But it was also identified as an opportunity to enhance the training component of students at the undergraduate level. And so with that in mind, I was asked to put forward a vision for what that might look like. And so to develop that vision, I took my own experiences and what I thought were maybe some unique experiences that I could bring to the department and to the faculty. And so reflecting on my experiences as an agronomist, farmer, research, and an alumnus of the faculty, And also, with knowledge of what the learning outcomes are from the curriculum review, I put together these learning objectives. So those learning objectives were: learn crop scouting skills, gain experience crop scouting, practice integrated crop management, build observational and critical thinking skills, be introduced to research principles, and understand the knowledge transfer process. So with these learning objectives in mind, a vision was put forward, and here's an outline of the soybean field agronomy course that was delivered to 7 diploma students this past summer. So this course was delivered in a variety of ways. We had some in-classroom lectures, we had in-field meetings, and a lot of it was actually done online. So there were 4 main components, the largest of which was their crop management portfolio. So for students to participate in this course, they required access to a commercial soybean field. So we met in April, we had a 3-hour orientation. I had industry partners provide a scouting toolkit for them. We reviewed crop scouting principles, and we reviewed all the crop scouting activities that they would go through throughout the growing season. So after that, they had a series of bi-weekly assignments that they had to submit online. Started with understanding the soil and landscape, crop planning, the seeding operation, all the way through to harvest, which was very delayed this year, residue management, and future crop planning. The second activity was a meeting at the Carman research farm. The third activity was the requirement for them to attend an extension event and report on that experience. And the fourth component was another in-classroom meeting once classes resumed in the fall, where we had oral presentations. Now, I must admit, this course wasn't intentionally designed with knowledge of experiential education. But now that I've reflected on the experience, and I've partnered with Cora and Michele, it really reflects a lot of the principles of experiential learning. And so for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to further describe the course activities using principles of experiential learning that are available through the Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning. So looking in the audience, I see graduate students and academics, so perhaps you can take away some of these principles and realize that, hey, maybe there are aspects of experiential learning that you're already using, or perhaps you're thinking of developing a new module or a new course, and you can take away some of these principles. So experiences are structured to require the learner to take initiative, make decisions, and be accountable. So the first concept here, to me, is being independent and taking initiative. So as I mentioned, for the crop management portfolio, there was a series of bi-weekly crop scouting assignments. So those were done independently, and they had to take their own initiative to do the scouting event and complete the reflective assignment. However, that experience was quite structured, in that each assignment had 2 components. So a lot of the assignments were instruction-based, where I gave them step-by-step instructions on how to conduct a certain scouting activity. Like here, one of the students is assessing the plant stand and weed scouting. So they would conduct that scouting activity, and their assignment would ask them, was your plant stand within the target? Why or why not? Would you make a different decision next time? What does that mean agronomically? Based on your weed scouting, what's your proposed weed management strategy and why? But each assignment also left room for observation, where I asked them to make general observations about anything relating to the crops, the pests, or the environment. Now I know as a student and an instructor, it can be difficult to get students to ask questions. Never mind make observations without much direction. So in order to stimulate curiosity and give them credit for taking the time to make observations, I reflected that expectation in the rubric. So students were assessed not only on whether the assignment was complete and their answers were correct, but also that they provided background information on why they made a certain decision for that crop. They compared different options and what the implications of the different options may have been. And so that rubric related to the principle that learners are actively engaged in posing questions, investigating, experimenting, being curious, etc. So each student seemed to develop kind of a unique story with their field this summer. But 4 of the best cases that I thought were related to observations and being curious, related to either pests or the environment. So one student identified and worked through the challenge of herbicide resistance. Another student noticed the edge effect of grasshoppers. And then 2 other students had issues related to the drought that we experienced this summer. So one student noticed a physiological symptom in the crop, and then another student noticed that yield potential wasn't optimized. Next, carefully chosen experiences are supported by reflection, critical analysis, and synthesis. So here we have an example from their very first assignment. So students were required to describe their soil, landscape, and cropping history in order for them to understand outcomes that they would see in their field throughout the season. So here we have the student identified that there was a manure in this field, drainage, different soil types. So here's another example of integrating knowledge that they probably would have learned in one of their first year soils course, and now they're applying it to their own crop. And this kind of sets up the observation that this student made in that he identified yellow patches in his soybean field. Now when a soybean farmer sees yellow soybeans, they automatically think iron chlorosis. So the student automatically diagnosed it as that. But upon further reflection and synthesis of some background information, we diagnosed it as potassium deficiency. So it was a very sandy field. The symptoms were occurring in a low-lying area of the field that actually was too wet and missed the potash application in the spring. Another example is correctly identifying diseases through correct assessment of where the symptoms are, the size, shape, pattern, color of lesions. So you'll notice I tried to use examples from soils, insects, hoping there would be a diverse audience. Building on the critical thinking component, the second activity was a meeting at the Carman research farm. So what I wanted to do with students here was introduce them to the scientific method, focus them in on how to set up a good experiment, and assess the quality of information. So we did this through a 1-hour lecture, followed by a 2-hour tour of my research plots in order for me to demonstrate those research principles. We also practiced making observations on what treatment differences we were seeing in some of the experiments. So this activity is particularly relevant for some of our industry partners who are really expanding their network of on-farm research. So companies and commodity groups are conducting research with farmers on a commercial scale. So students after this module were able to identify where in a field they should set up an experiment, the importance of replication and randomization, and with that knowledge, they can better assess the quality of information that they're receiving within the industry. Recognize and encourage spontaneous opportunities for learning. So this principle is one that I think is fairly easy to incorporate, especially in traditional lectures, and I think many of you are already doing this. So when I give guest lectures, I always try to have current events, so whether there's a market action happening or an emerging pest. So it's not necessarily planned material, but it shows students that we can adapt and that we're in tune with current things that are happening in our area. And for this course in particular, the examples I had were this year soil erosion was a really widespread problem, and we're working in a low residue crop. So it really resonated with them, the soil and residue management scouting activities that I had them do this year. Another example is here we are at the research farm, and the intent was to discuss research, but we came across a patch of weeds that are normally quite difficult to tell apart, and so we took that opportunity to practice our weed identification skills. The results of the learning are personal and form the basis for future experience and learning. So the first concept here is that the results of the learning are personal. So 5 of the 7 students used their own field, and the other students used either a relative or a neighbor's field. So again, they had a personal and vested interest in the outcome, and this is much like the MPP project of the diploma program, where they're using their own farm. And the second concept here is that we're forming the basis for future experiences and learning. So even though we use soybeans as the model crop, a lot of the scouting tools and principles should be applied to every crop within the cropping system year after year. And so some examples of those are here we are. They're measuring harvest losses, they're measuring the residue cover, and they're estimating soil moisture. So these are all things that aren't necessarily unique to that year and that crop, but it's something that can be set up for future experiences. And building on future experiences in learning, the third activity was attending an extension event. So here is my interpretation of the knowledge transfer process in agriculture. So starting with us as researchers, going through message development, recommendations, and adopted on the farm. So by having students participate in each of these processes through this course, I think it really sets them up for lifelong participation in the process. And here's just an example of some of the events that the students attended. So did I see a change in behavior and knowledge following this course? So what I did was I set up a pre and post evaluation, which is a tool we often use in extension. And I asked them 10 questions at the beginning of the course and at the end of the course. So of course, as a young academic, I was hoping to see a large increase in all of these areas. But I think it can be expected that some of them improved more than others. So I think actually now that I've reflected on it, it's actually reaffirming to me to know that they were already crop scouting on a fairly regular basis, and they thought it provided value to my farm operation. I was surprised the little change in their knowledge of scientific research principles and practices, especially following the outcomes of their online quiz. But the areas that did improve were that they were more likely to actively seek out research-based information and utilize that for their crop management decisions. They were also more confident in their soybean crop management knowledge and were more likely to practice an integrated crop management strategy. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michele to talk about future developments in experiential learning.
So where are we going and where opportunities are there for experiential learning in our faculty and in all of our programs? It was really good to see you here, Jatindra, because I know we've also spoke about the importance of those shared learning outcomes. So where can we go? Well, I believe right now there's an opportunity, and we've got a really good team of academics. We had a session last week involving the academics who deliver and developing the revised curriculum from diploma. And there's opportunities throughout those various courses, throughout the curriculum, for us to look at where we could incorporate experiential learning. And the school's going to be hosting 2 other events this year, working with that academic team. And I know just from the feedback I've received from some individuals, experiential learning is going to be a topic in that area. Also, we're thrilled and fortunate to have Cora here. She's been working within the school, in my department for the DAGR courses with the instructors who are using experiential-based learning. She's assessing and working with them, observing, and is going to hopefully help them identify where and when we should perhaps expand into more experiential learning. Also, Cora's going to be leading a research project. We secured a grant from the Teaching Enhancement and Learning Fund, and Cora is going to be looking at some experiential learning models that are related to agriculture and with a literature review, and we'll develop some more knowledge and expertise in this area for us to look at the next term. And we've got a wonderful resource. Shek, can you stand up? If you haven't met Shek Old-Moulay, he's our faculty development specialist from the Center for Advancement in Teaching Learning. And I know he's worked with the 3 of us and so many, and has lots of experience and has access to other resources from the center. So if you haven't and you're teaching, and I encourage you, Shek's here to support teaching and learning, and please knock on his door. Is that okay, Shek? So I think what we've really determined as an academic team is that experiential learning is an opportunity, if we embrace it, that we hopefully can bring our teaching learning experience to that higher level of critical thinking, decision making, integration. And we would really like to work with you, and we're going to encourage you to join this partnership. and explore opportunities to move forward. And we want to thank you for allowing us to share our passion and share our experiences. And Anamika, thanks for allowing this partnership.
Yeah, it was a lovely presentation, great photos, and look at the time, they were well prepared. So thank you for that as well. Are there any questions in the room?
Yes, Mike.
I think you make a really good case for experiential learning. You provide a lot of great examples, a lot of good evidence. One thing that I would challenge you on is a very small part of your presentation, but I think it's an important one. When you make the distinction between experience-based learning and experiential learning, one of the examples you give is the example of indigenous learning between generations, and I would argue that's actually experiential learning, especially when you consider that reflection, clarification of values, things like this. And when you consider the fact that our indigenous cultures in Canada and elsewhere have been really the only cultures that have lived in ecological balance with the natural world. So I would make that observation.
Okay, thank you for that contribution.
I just, regarding that, I'd say 4-H is a little like that too. It was focused type of learning. Like you had to do the things, and if I get the difference that you're talking about, experiential, you focus their experience on the areas where they really need them. So kids do not want to do books. So when I was forced to do books as a 4-H student, I think that was very good for me.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to ask was, Kristen, you had, I think, a bunch of basic knowledge that was already with the students before you did this. Is that a requirement for this to work?
So that's an interesting question and observation. That was actually one of the challenges I found with the course, was that I had expected certain prerequisites almost in, specifically like weed management as an example. And with the curriculum change, now some of those courses that they're going to have coming into this summer course are going to be a little different. So I found gaps in some of the theory before I had them apply it, which I thought maybe was a negative, but it potentially could be a positive in that they're seeing the practical application of it, and then they're going into their second year and kind of filling in those theoretical gaps. So it depends on the discipline. Soils, they had a strong foundation, and then depending on some of the plant science courses, they hadn't had them yet. So I would say it depends. But it's a challenge with that second year bridging course where they don't have all the prerequisites. Yes?
I had a question for Cora.
Yeah.
The reflection part of the experience, I'm thinking of just the structure of our part of the campus here. Where did the students gather to reflect? Can the space enhance reflection? So my question is, at York University, when they created that model, are there places, like is the physical place involved in fostering a place for effective reflection during the academic year, for example?
Yeah. In the reports that they've launched, they haven't talked about physical space as one of those opportunities for reflection. But I could definitely see, and is now one of the things that I'm going to look more into. How do we enhance this? How do we take this, even as enhanced learning? How do we take it to a whole other level?
And maybe a quick follow-up. I mean, I'm seeing fewer students around the campus because everything's online. So everybody's at home in their house coat, university. But I wonder about what we can do to create spaces. And I'm not an expert. I'm just asking a question. But I think the atrium does serve a purpose for a lot of reflection. And when I see in the library to be quiet, I go, that's exactly the opposite of what I want to see there. I want to see lively discussion. So, just some thoughts.
Yeah, Phil.
So this distinction And I love all the philosophy stuff that went on, obviously, but I think the one reason that some of us will be saying, yeah, that's already happening, is because we're the curious, the academics are the curiously minded who, if you give us any experience, we're going to self-reflect and we're going to be curious about it. So just by giving them the experience, some students will be baked in that they're going to self-reflect. They're going to ask some questions before and after. But what makes it experiential is that that's guided and built into the experience rather than hoping and dreaming it's going to happen.
Right.
So that, now I guess where I'm going with this is, so you could give an experience to a class and the A students are going to kind of already be experiential. But then how do we, and then if we're guiding it, then we're trying to do that for more. What are the outcomes? Like, is there, when we give every student the experience that the A student would get, do those other students tend to get higher grade performance, better learning outcomes? Like, what's the measurable outcome here? And for when we do this, like, is there a quantifiable result?
So certainly in the research, and there is quite a lot of research. My intention here today was kind of give it a general overview, kind of big picture.
But I'm so curious.
Yes, you are. It's great. And as Michele touched upon, as our academic team, we're going to keep this conversation going. Like, this is the beginning, and it's a journey. And so let's keep those conversations. Let's get there together. But yeah, and there's different strategies to create more reflection. Some studies show that students who don't do as well in a traditional classroom do better in these types of environments. So, but with each study, it's a little bit unique and a different population. And what's interesting to me, or a little bit surprising to me, is I haven't found a whole lot that's specific to agriculture students. And so I'm excited because that's a whole new area of development of experiential learning in agriculture, and what are the outcomes or what are the outputs that we can see for our students.
Can I ask then a follow-up, which is so if you run students through a course like this where they're guided to be more self-reflective and more critical thinking, does that become a skill they carry forward into future classes and experiences? Like, is it, or do they turn it off when we stop asking for it?
I'd like to think so, but that's another gap in the research is the longer term effects. So if you do an experiential learning course, does this show up 5 years later, or are you using some of those critical thinking, or do you even recognize, have you made that connection that I learned that in that course and now I'm using it in the field? So certainly there's more opportunity for lots of great research in that regard.
Any other questions? Those were very good questions, so maybe we don't need any more questions. So with that, I would like to thank them once again.